Hey, YouTube family, and welcome to another video of the Kevin Strong Show. I am your host, Kevin Strong, your urban cowboy. Howdy. And in this video, we're going to talk about rent versus buying. We're going to look at 5 cities where it's more advantageous to rent than to buy. And then we're going to look at another 5 cities where it's more advantageous to buy than rent. So welcome to this video. Really excited about this. All this is based on 2023 numbers. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe, smash that like button, comment and share because I care. So without further ado, let me go ahead and jump into this here. Let's see here. I need to get this bigger, guys. Hopefully you can see that. Let's see. Let's try this. All right, hope you guys can see that slide already. Nope, that's going to be a little hard to read. So retake. Let's try this one other time here. We're going to go on the fly with this one. There we go. All right, see, I figured I'd get that. We're just going to go with the flow. And let's go ahead and jump into it. So let's go to the first presentation, talking about points of discussion. The question is on whether to rent or buy is dependent upon many factors other than the paycheck one shells out every month for housing. One city's and even neighborhoods' plans for the future and family status all weigh heavily on the question that has been causing heated debates for generations. So there's a big debate. Should I buy or should I rent? I'm going to share some information. You ultimately come to your own conclusion. Ultimately, in my humble opinion, I think it is imprudent to. I think it's prudent to own real estate. You don't necessarily have to own where you live, but to own real estate historically has been one of the most systematic ways that people from the middle class have secured wealth. So, you know, skyrocketing home prices have been happening all across the United States for the last couple of years. This is completely putting people out of the home buying experience. There's an affordability crisis in the nation, pretty much everywhere you look, even in cities where the homes are affordable. People's wages are just not keeping up with the acceleration in home prices. It's cheaper to rent in 45 of the 50 largest metros. And that's up from just 30 last year. So once again, that speaks directly to affordability crisis that I think is going to be plaguing us for quite some time. In my humble opinion, it's going to get worse before it gets better. The last bullet point at the bottom of this slide basically is talking about how they were able to calculate the affordability in terms of rent versus buying. So I'm not going to get into all that. Based on my research and putting this all together and using realtor.com as a source, I think the information is pretty accurate for the most part. So let's go ahead and jump into this. So cities where it is cheaper to rent. So these are 5 metropolitan cities in the country that is cheaper to rent. Cheaper to rent than buy. Austin, Texas, coming in at first. Second is San Francisco, California. Third is Seattle, Washington, my stumping ground. Once again, I'm not born and raised here. Don't hold that to me. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. Please don't do that to me. Number 4 is Boston, and number 5 is Portland, Oregon. So you can see for the most part, it's on the West Coast. And these cities, with the exception of Boston, I don't know that market too well, have seen a significant increase in home values in the last 3 years. So we're going to look into some of the medium incomes for these particular cities that we're talking about now and what the average mortgage payment would be if you decided to buy instead of rent. So here we go. Starting off with Austin, Texas, the medium rent is around $1,659. So let's just say $1,700. But if you want to own in Austin, more than double, right? $3,600. San Francisco, $3,000 to rent, almost $6,000 to own in San Francisco. Seattle, rent $2,000 to own, about $3,800. Let's just call it $4,000. And from the previous year, it has jumped up 57%. So all of these cities scream the affordability crisis, and I think these cities are set up for a significant pullback in home prices, and they will continue to fall into the medium income and somewhere in line with house prices, which makes it affordable for someone to purchase a home. Boston is at basically almost $3,000 a month, and to own a home, the mortgage payment's almost $5,000, and in Portland, $1,800 to rent, and to have a mortgage in that area is $3,000. So let's go ahead and jump to where it's cheaper to buy. And as you can see, this is pretty much in the Midwest and on the East Coast. So it's on the opposite side of the country, opposed to when we're looking at where it's more cheaper to rent. So looking at this particular order, you've got Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis is an interesting city. I spent 5 years down there, love the South. The hardcore part of Memphis is plagued with a lot of crime. They statistically end up being one of the most violent cities based on FBI statistics in the nation. So in terms of getting a quality of life and having a good school system, you're going to have to push out to the suburbs, about 25 to 30 miles, places like, what comes to mind here? Arlington, Lakeland, if I'm not mistaken, Collierville, Germantown, very, very solid areas. But once again, these are places that are good 25 to 30 miles outside of Memphis. Coming in at number 2 is Pittsburgh. Number 3 is Birmingham, Alabama. Number 4 is St. Louis. And number 5 is Baltimore. Now, St. Louis and Baltimore, I think, are in tantamount with Memphis in terms of crime. So those particular areas that are heavily dense and populated, you're going to want to push out a good 25 to 30 miles outside of those downtown areas to find affordable, I would say affordable housing, good solid suburbs, and a good school system. More importantly, quality of life is associated with the level of crime. So if you're in an area where you're just plagued with a lot of crime, it's hard to have a quality of life. So now we're going to jump in and look at some of the medium incomes as it applies to like the first slide I did when we dealt with the ones in that were more expensive it was better to rent than to buy. Now this is buy than rent. So now we're going to flip it around and look at those numbers. So let me make sure I mark this down because I think there's something on my slide that I did not include. So we got Memphis here, we got Pittsburgh 2, we got 3, we got Birmingham, 4 is St. Louis, and Baltimore is coming in at 5. Okay, so here we are, Memphis, Tennessee. The medium monthly rent is about $1,300, and the medium monthly cost to buy is only $847. So that's significantly down. Now, $847 in Memphis, that's probably one of those areas where you probably just don't want to be. If they're saying that you can buy a house for $847, that 47 means instead of the 8, put a K in there or some AK. Put AK in there instead of 8. So you need an AK-47 if you want to find a place to buy in Memphis for $847 because you're going to be running out of bullets. I don't mean to throw shade on that area, but you're talking about that. There's certain parts you just got to stay away from it. Pittsburgh, let's just say that comes in at $1,400, almost $1,500, but to own it's only $1,100. And coming at number 3 was Birmingham, Alabama. I forgot to type that in on my slide here. That is roughly almost $1,200 to rent, but only $900 to buy. St. Louis is at $1,200 and $1,100, so it's pretty much dead even. And last but not least is Baltimore, $1,800 and almost $1,700 respectively to rent and buy. So I hope that information helps you guys out a little bit. So now we're going to talk about the pros and cons of buying a home. The pros is that obviously you build up a lot of equity. It improves your credit score because as you make that payment on time, having a mortgage payment on your credit profile is a big plus, especially when you're making timely payments. Mortgage interest and property taxes that may be deductible, I don't really think that's a big deal. Hell, you're just getting back money that you already gave to the government, but most of the people aren't necessarily making a primary purchase based on the tax advantages, but it is an advantage nevertheless. Buyers have full control over home improvements and upgrades. Homes frequently increase in value over the life of the loan. We're going to talk about that at the end of this video, so please stay tuned. The cons are there's money up front, right? You have to come up with the down payment. Maybe 3.5 is the lowest. If you have a VA loan, 0%, but sometimes you might be looking at 10 or 20% down payment. The process can be somewhat complex, so make sure you get with somebody who really understands either the first-time home buying experience or the mortgage experience in itself. Just as full disclosure, yours truly is a licensed real estate agent in the state of Washington, and I have a mortgage broker's license in Washington as well. Property taxes and HOA fees are the buyer's responsibility. You guys already know that. Buyers incur any maintenance and repairs. You own it, you fix it. Typically a long-term investment. So that can be advantageous and a disadvantage as well. The reason why I'm saying that is because neighborhoods go up and sometimes neighborhoods go down. But nevertheless, if that's your primary resident, you kind of basically have to deal with that unless you're getting ready to sell the place. Pros and cons of renting. So fewer upfront expenses. Certain utilities probably are included in your rent payment. There's no long-term commitment once the lease ends. So since we're in this hybrid work environment, which is probably going to be around for a long period of time, that might be advantageous to you to be a little bit more portable. Landlord pays for necessary repairs and maintenance. This could be a very good blessing to someone who's renting, because then they don't get hit with unexpected large repairs, like you have to repair the roof, or the water heater goes out, or you have some electrical problems. All of that stuff the landlord's responsible for, not you. Rental insurance is inexpensive. Guys, I've talked about this before. It's really cheap. There's absolutely no reason why, if you are a renter anywhere in the United States, that you should not have rental insurance. It's pretty much pennies on the dollar. Some of the cons of renting. The landlord can decide at any time to raise the rent, which we've experienced as a nation within the last 2 years. In certain metropolitan areas, the rent is starting to come down, but it's still out of whack in terms of people's wages. A landlord has the final say on pets, properties, and modifications. For some people, that is a big deal. So proceed with caution. Less stability. It's the landlord's choice whether or not to renew your lease. This could be a big deal, because once you get entrenched in a neighborhood, maybe your kids get acclimated to a certain school system, you're thinking you're going to be there for a while, then all of a sudden you get that news from your landlord that he or she or they have decided to sell the property, and as a change of ownership, you're going to have to leave. And that could basically throw your life upside down if you're not expecting something like that. Renting does not build equity. Technically, there's just no technically to it. That is true, and may be required to allow landlord access to home for inspection. Some people don't like that. They feel that it's an invasion in privacy. I don't really think it's a big deal. And most landlords are very courteous and professional about giving you advance notice as to when they need to enter your property. So I'm glad you guys stuck around to the end. And if you did, here comes the bonus section. I was talking about making sure you clearly understand how much you sold your house for and what your profit really is. So I'm going to go ahead and share that information with you. So here we go. So here's the situation. Let's say 20 years ago, you bought a house for $150,000. Okay. And then you sold it for, let's say, $400,000. So there's a $250,000 profit. And everybody likes to talk this way. Man, I sold my house for 100. I got to, put that accent there because I got the cowboy hat on. So damn it, I bought my house for $150,000 and I sold it for $400,000, right? So now we're talking about what, a $250,000 profit. When people talk about the profit that they make from selling their homes, 99.999% of them are talking about nominal numbers. These numbers are not adjusted for inflation. Keep in mind, folks, when you bought that house 20 years ago, things were a hell of a lot cheaper in 2003 compared to what prices are in 2023. So I went back and looked at what the average inflation rate is, historically speaking, from 1960 up to like 2020 or 2021. It's roughly 3.8%. So if you factor in inflation every year from the time you bought that house, from the time you sold it, that house factoring in inflation is really $264,000. So your profit is only the amount above the $264,000 because you have to factor in inflation. If you're not beating inflation, you're not beating the game. If your wages don't keep up with inflation, you're not keeping up with the price of goods and services. So this is a very, very universal method, but very few people apply it to looking at how much they profit when they sell their home. So getting back to the example, guys, we're looking at $264,000, right? Factoring in inflation. So that only leaves what, about $135,000. Now let's say your property taxes are $3,000 a year. And I'm being nice, but let's just say for simple math. So 3 times 20, right, is $60,000. Now you've got, let's say maybe what, $1,200 a year in homeowners insurance, maybe a little bit more. Let's say 1,800. Let's just say 1,200. So that's another what? 20,000. So now we're at 80, right? And we started at 135. So now we're looking at 135 minus 80 is why can't I add right now? We're talking about $55,000 when you factor in inflation. We've got $60,000 from property taxes, and let's say another $20,000 from homeowners insurance. That's 80 from the 135 or something like that. You see where I'm going with that math now? So you're well under what you think you're making. You're not getting $250,000, and I haven't factored in maintenance and all the other repairs. So I'm sure there's a lot of things that the average homeowner has to put back into their home to maintain it over a 20-year period. So please make sure that you're understanding that you are calculating the appropriate numbers and always factor in inflation, because at the end of the day, when you get that quote unquote $250,000 check minus commissions, real estate fees, and all the other things, I'm just keeping this simple. That $250,000 is not the same $250,000 as it would be 20 years ago. So I hope you guys found this video in a good place. Once again, if you have not subscribed to my channel, please do so. Smash that like button before you click off. That does help me out. I'm going to end with my famous slogan. Keep your credit score up and your debt down. This was the Kevin Strong Show, and y'all come back now, you hear?